where he puts the entire burden of proof on Kendrick. Says, hey,
Respectfully, there are a couple of mistakes that you make in this video. One is that you're saying that people are glossing over the arguments that Drake made, and that the burden of proof with the Heart Part 6 is that now it's on Kendrick. And that's not the case. Part of that is because this is a rap battle, not the criminal justice system. This is not a court case. There is no actual burden of proof. There is nothing that he has to prove or disprove because the truth has always been subservient to whoever raps better, whoever wins over the fans, and whoever has the best strategy. And let's remember who first made an accusation that they had no proof of and still have yet to demonstrate it, and that was Drake. Because Kendrick had dropped Euphoria, then he dropped 616, and that was basically a warning to Drake. Then Drake dropped Family Matters. When Drake dropped Family Matters, Drake made specific accusations that had no proof and had no evidence for. Kendrick, having already prepared for this, made no attempt to rebut any of that because he went ahead and dropped, of course, his response, which was Meet the Grams. What happened is that Drake took a punch, Kendrick countered, and then knocked him on his ass. From that moment on, really from Euphoria on, but from that moment specifically, Drake was playing defense. So Drake had already attempted to put the so-called burden of proof on Kendrick. It just didn't work because it didn't matter. And so now we can't look at Kendrick and say, hey, you have this requirement that you need to be able to show and prove when Drake is the first one who made the accusations about his child, about his significant other. So no. We don't get to hold one person accountable for the truth and not the other person. Now, beyond that, Drake just had a really bad strategy, and the Heart Part 6 is a really bad strategic move. The only thing that's halfway decent about it is Drake claiming and taking credit for the internet theory that he planted it, which there's also no evidence for. He tells Kendrick that the people that he got his information from are clowns, and then yet telling him that I gave you the information. This screams that this is written by multiple people who did not think this out, and Drake just used his team. He starts off by telling Kendrick that the Pulitzer Prize winner is definitely spiraling. Kendrick had already accused Drake of spiraling back in Euphoria. You are repeating a claim that was already used against you. Null and void. He says Kendrick didn't fact check things and he should be less impatient, and yet Drake goes on to misinterpret a Kendrick song and use that as evidence as to why he has a problem with, offenders. And he interpreted it wrong. Fact checking. Drake does attempt to back Kendrick into a corner by asking, why isn't Whitney denying all the allegations? Which is quite frankly a stupid question, because why would I allow my non-rap significant other to speak and deny something by giving you any kind of attention or power in this regard? No, you're not important to her. Why would she acknowledge you? Outside of a few lines, the entirety of this diss track is really Drake playing defense, because he starts off taking shots and really accusing Kendrick of things that he himself is doing, but then goes on to explain to either Kendrick or the fans that he's not, in fact, an offender, that he's never been with anybody underage, and saying that he's too respected and that if he was messing with young girls, he'd have been arrested. That's just so illogical and factually not true that it's stupid, and people recognize it. And Kendrick listening is recognizing that's dumb. By that statement alone, people will find it hard to believe that Drake planned anything out. You can't request that somebody else be factual, and then even the simple and most basic statements that you make about yourself are not factual. Hip hop, of course, has not always been about truth and everything else. There's exaggeration, there's hyperbole, there's lies. But this is a simple statement of observation, and he failed at it. And Drake, not being able to penetrate any other kind of way, again, goes after his wife, fiance, and says, I'm your baby mama screensaver, and then mentions that I'm only effing with Whitney's, not Millie Bobby Brown's. Like, nobody mentioned her at all. This is evidence that, again, Drake is on the defensive. So he didn't successfully turn anything and put anything back on Kendrick. There's absolutely no evidence that Kendrick ever abused her. There's nothing that's been made public. There's no evidence to suggest that Kendrick is not the father. See, when Kendrick accuses Drake of something, it's not that hard to believe for people that aren't hardcore Drake fans. For example, Drake already lied about having a child and tried to hide the child. Well, Kendrick said, well, you've done that again. That's not hard to believe because you already did that. Kendrick said, you like young girls. Well, that's not hard to believe because all of the questionable things Drake has done is said, like texting Millie Bobby Brown at 14, talking about a young woman's breast on stage. She's 17 years old. Mentioning somebody in Drake's crew, Baca, who was charged with trafficking. Or the fact that he slept with Wayne's girl, which is factual. He did that when Wayne was locked up. Now, there's some dispute as to when exactly it happened, but it happened. So, in summation, people aren't glossing over anything. They're just not changing the standard for diss records, and they're not willing to give Drake a grace that they're not going to give Kendrick. Because nobody's going to require Kendrick to produce anything when they haven't required it from Drake.